In 2010, Nintendo released a little game you might have heard of, Super Mario Galaxy 2, and it changed the formula established by its predecessors in a really interesting way. If you boot up Super Mario 64, Sunshine, or Galaxy after the credits roll, the narrative is reset to some point before the final boss, allowing the player to clear any of the unfinished or locked levels they've come across. If you boot up Super Mario Galaxy 2 after its final boss, however, Webbo will be shocked to see that Mario is returned to Starship Mario. Bowser was defeated and the universe was saved, so there should be nothing left for him to do, right? That is when the player is introduced to World S. This special area only unlocks after clearing Bowser's Galaxy generator and houses the hardest challenges the game has to offer. As you make your way through the myriad of increasingly difficult missions, you'll have to scour through prior worlds in order to collect every single Power Star and Green Star, and eventually unlock the Grand Master Galaxy. This galactic gauntlet requires mastery of nearly every skill the player has learned thus far, pulling mechanics from all throughout the game to create an ultimate test of sorts. And as if that wasn't enough, the Ultimate Test has its own Power Star and Comet Medal that, when collected in tandem with 9,999 star bits, unlocks the perfect run. Do the Ultimate Test all over again, but with no checkpoints and without taking damage. True to its name, this finale really does require perfection. In the following years, Nintendo would follow a trend of including secret post-game challenge levels in Mario platformers, though disappointingly, these challenge levels would start to lose their challenge over time. 3D Land and 3D World both allow power-ups in their final challenges, allowing the player to damage boost through particularly difficult obstacles, on top of the inherent benefits of having a power-up. Not to mention the multiplayer in Super Mario 3D World, which won't allow the level to be reset until all players have been KO'd simultaneously. Then you have the darker side in Super Mario Odyssey, which allows the player to take damage up to 5 times in normal mode or indefinitely in easy mode. Finally, and perhaps most egregiously of all, you have the final test, Badge Marathon, in Super Mario Bros. Wonder. Not only does it suffer the same power-up and multiplayer cheese as Super Mario 3D World, the level also has a checkpoint flag smack dab in the middle. And it doesn't stop there. The final test is pay to win. That's right, for just $20 a year, you too can completely nullify the consequences of death simply by sticking close to other players that appear when connected to the internet. And I know this might sound weird or bad, but I'm gonna make an argument that this is the game's strongest mechanic. Let me tell you a story about a player named Super D and an online experience they had with 3 strangers, one that completely recontextualized my time with Super Mario Bros. Wonder. His story begins when he decides to revisit the final test after 100%ing the game. At some point during the level, Super D happens upon 3 online players, and the 4 of them greet each other by crouching and sending smiley faces. It wouldn't be long before these players would become inseparable, patiently waiting to progress through the level until whoever had fallen behind caught up with the others. They pushed the game's very limited communication options to their absolute limit, such as using emotes to signal to one another when to time their jumps. They vowed that if one player fell, they would all fall, until all of them reached the pipe together. These players were even willing to risk losing a life mere inches from the goal pole and losing their progress just to meet back up with anyone who had fallen behind. And after countless lives lost and a solid hour spent supporting and encouraging one another, the ensemble made it to the end. They proved that their invisible badges weren't the only intangible force they were bound to. Super D and his new friends formed an unbreakable bond that may have begun to fade as the hub world separated them, but could never truly disappear. Super Mario Bros. Wonder is a game that I've wanted to cover from the moment I got my hands on it, and I've always known what the topic of the video would be about, the game's rather unconventional online multiplayer. Of course, I was inspired by this thread, but I've also seen encouraging posts from countless other users who were inspired by their online friends. And this widespread inspiration is the type of human experience that you simply can't put a price on. Doesn't stop companies from trying though. Before I can dive into Wonder, I should briefly explain my past experiences and Nintendo's history with online gaming. When Nintendo launched the Nintendo Wi-Fi Connection service to coincide with the release of Mario Kart DS, their mission statement was as follows: simple, safe, free. Providing an online service that's approachable for the casual audience, safe for players of all ages, and comes at no extra cost to the consumer. And though I've spent little time with this service specifically, I know I should have my 2000s kid card revoked, I've spent a lot of time online on my Wii U, and this motto shaped my first experiences with online gaming. Games like Super Smash Bros., Super Mario Maker, and Mario Kart 8 left such a big impact on me as a kid, specifically because these online modes were such a radical departure from the typical couch co-op experiences that Nintendo was known for. These online games were truly unique experiences that you couldn't have anywhere else. Well, maybe not the last game, I'd rather watch paint dry, at least I wouldn't use bandwidth. But my library of Wii U games, coupled with supported third-party games like Minecraft, and the incredible things I had heard about Nintendo's new IP from friends in the internet, left me confident that Nintendo's online offerings would only get better during the next generation of gaming. Alright, welcome to Nintendo Switch Online, a paid service that lets you play tennis online, play F-Zero online, play tennis online, play a 2-hour game of Mario Party online, play F-Zero online. What a disappointing time to be a fan of not paying $19.99 plus applicable taxes to play video games online. Okay, sure, the Splatoon franchise saw quite the growth on the Switch, both in popularity and as an online-focused IP. Shout out to the US Supreme Court, by the way, the player base really started to boom after this patch. We also saw quite a few franchises, including 2D and 3D Mario, incorporate online multiplayer for the very first time. But 9 times out of 10, a Switch Online enabled game just adds online matchmaking to an existing local multiplayer mode, and it rarely does that well. Even the service's unique games are just Tetris but online, Pac-Man but online, Super Mario Bros. But online, and oh boy, I'm on the edge of my fucking seat right now. For so long, there hasn't been a single Switch game, besides maybe Mario Maker 2, that made me feel like the online fee was worth paying. Most of the appeal of the service nowadays comes from the library of retro titles that can be played online with friends, which I have to admit has become a great incentive to stay invested in both tiers. But even still, the main new feature is taking existing local multiplayer content and sloppily porting it to a peer-to-peer online system. For once, I just love to play an original game that doesn't force me into a room or queue, changes the way I approach its mechanics in a meaningful way, and allows me to passively benefit from online connectivity without the need to clear hours out of my schedule beforehand. Enter Super Mario Bros. Wonder. And what a wonder this Super Mario Bros. Was. I don't know where I was going with that. What a neat little surprise this was, a brand new mainline 2D Mario platformer nearly 7 years into the Switch's lifespan, over a decade after the release of New Super Mario Bros. U, and announced just a month after Tears of the Kingdom's launch. Remember when people thought this would be the Switch 1's last big exclusive? Like, imagine following the Nintendo Switch since its launch and eagerly clearing your schedule to complete this massive and innovative open world experience, the console's long-awaited magnum opus and last hurrah, and then opening Twitter a month later and seeing Nintendo tweet some shit about a visually enhanced port of Dark Moon. Can I be honest for a second? Thank God the Switch's library didn't cap off with Tears of the Kingdom. I know it sounds selfish to fans of the older or more obscure IPs, but the library of original Mario games on Switch would have been pretty barren if Nintendo had switched gears to the next console in, say, late 2023. 2D Mario only had 2 reimagined Wii U titles to its name. Mario Party was in desperate need of a good original game, and there were still no traditional Mario RPGs. And don't try to make an argument that Mario plus Rabbids should count, because last I checked, Mario wasn't known for his tactical RPGs, but I'm getting off topic. It wasn't just the content in these games that meant so much to us fans. It was about being vindicated after dedicating the past decade advocating for change and having our prayers answered. For the first time, Nintendo proved to its fans that it knows how to listen, it just took a while for them to put our ideas into practice. and Super Mario Bros. Wonder in particular was the perfect game to usher in this new era for the Mario franchise. Nintendo followed up one of the most stale and repetitive franchises in gaming with a zany and visually striking product that's bursting at the seams with creativity and, you know, that word. Wonder! There's just one small caveat that reared its ugly head prior to launch: the online multiplayer. In Super Mario Maker 2, you'd be randomly matched with other players, either competitively or cooperatively, the former allowing you to collect points and rank up, and the latter serving as a simple way to play user-made levels with other people. And in the Nintendo Switch port of Super Mario 3D World, online rooms were added allowing one player to host their save file online, and up to 3 friends to join the game as if they were all playing on the same system. However, Super Mario Bros. Wonder doesn't have an online system that allows you to directly interact with other players. Instead, you will sometimes come across random players in the middle of levels, who will appear as ghost-like figures. And at face value, these ghosts appear to add little more to the solo experience than freebie power-ups and cardboard cutouts to catch your fall. At face value, it's easy to understand why fans were upset at this development. Who would go out of their way to pay for an online subscription and waste their precious bandwidth just to make an already easy game marginally easier? Well, to understand what the intention of Wonder's online functionality was, we must first understand the premise of the game and how it functions in solo play. Super Mario Bros. Wonder follows the Mario Brothers, of course, and a big cast of familiar faces, making their way to the Flower Castle in the Flower Kingdom, a neighboring land to the Mushroom Kingdom. Its ruler, Prince Florian, sent out these invitations to present to his guests this completely inconspicuous glowing item taking center stage. Taking the reality-bending Wonder Flower for himself, close enough, welcome back Sonic Forces, Bowser's form combines with that of the Flower Castle to become Castle Bowser, a floating structure that imprisons the kingdom's citizens and leaves nasty piranha plants everywhere. With the Flower Kingdom and perhaps the universe now in imminent danger, Mario and friends bravely volunteer to help Prince Florian clean up the mess that Bowser made, thus beginning Super Mario Bros. Wonder. Wonder follows a similar design philosophy to Super Mario 3D World, combining the structure of a 2D Mario game with the colorful worlds and wacky concepts of a 3D Mario game. In addition to the traditional side-scrolling levels, Wonder also features numerous types of bonus levels, all of which task the player with completing a certain objective in order to earn a Wonder Seed. Wonder Seeds are this game's primary collectible. Traditional side-scrolling levels offer 1 seed for clearing a Wonder Flower segment and 1 seed for each goal pole, making 2 seeds for most levels and 3 seeds for those with a hidden exit. The Wonder Flower is a powerful item that causes the player, the level, or both to be transformed when collected. The result is a mini-level within the main stage that tasks the player with becoming acclimated to an unconventional control scheme or level layout, usually within a time limit, in order to obtain a Wonder Seed. For the most part, the objective in each world is to collect enough Wonder Seeds to unlock palaces and steal back the royal seeds.
It's me, Joker.
Worlds with a palace task the player with defeating Wonder Bowser Jr. to restore balance to the environment and or culture of a given area, whereas Worlds 3 and 5 task the player with clearing special trials and rescuing trapped miners, respectively. Each Royal Seed dissipates 1 Quad Piranha surrounding Castle Bowser in the center of the Flower Kingdom, putting our heroes on the clock to collect the 6 Royal Seeds before Bowser can pull off his big wonder. The world maps of Super Mario Bros. Wonder implement a combination of the traditional linear paths based on the progression of the new Super Mario Bros. Games, and open areas which allow the player to access any open levels and linear paths. Like in the 3D sandbox games, there's an element of freedom in being able to freely explore the world and choose which objectives to tackle and in what order. The game is even so nice as to score levels based on difficulty, allowing players to seek out challenges based on their skill level. These scores are also useful in scouting out important locales, as the most difficult levels tend to be placed close to Captain Toad's hiding spots, hidden levels, and even entrances to a secret world. Finally, the Petal Isles. This collection of small islands connect the 6 main worlds together in a loop. Like Super Mario Odyssey's Power Moons, Wonder Seeds are specific to each world, meaning the seeds you collect in Pipe Rock Plateau can't be used to unlock roadblocks in the Petal Isles, so the player will be tasked with collecting more seeds in this area in order to access the entrances of each world. And that about sums up the general gameplay loop of Super Mario Bros. Wonder. But anyways, now that we understand how Wonder functions, we can start to dive more into how its design philosophy differs from past Mario titles. The most obvious deviation being how Super Mario Bros. Wonder puts more emphasis on collectibles than past 2D games. While the new Super Mario Bros. Games did have collectibles that could unlock levels, at no point is the player ever required to use them. For the most part, you're always following a linear path, and the most freedom you're given is whether to spend star coins to take a split path. Wonder is much more open-ended, utilizing its collectibles to allow players to pick and choose challenges that match their skill level. Super Mario Bros. Wonder continues the trend of modern platformers shifting away from punishing unskilled players for poor performance, and towards creating simplified and accessible gameplay loops that encourage skilled players to create their own self-imposed challenges. One of the easiest ways to do this is simply to exclude the life system, though Wonder surprisingly didn't take this route. In my humble opinion, lives have been a long outdated and archaic tradition of platformers. If they aren't serving to artificially prolong the runtime of a game that's plenty long as is, then they're completely negligible, and Wonder clearly falls into the latter category. But otherwise, the game generally does a very good job of catering to players of all skill levels without once asking them to select between a traditional easy or hard mode. The closest we have to a difficulty select is the character select, with the Yoshis and Nabbit being placed on an easiness spectrum of sorts, based on how susceptible they all are to stage hazards. Like in Super Mario Odyssey, the layout of the world is designed in such a way that the player is urged in one direction, but can easily break from the main path to find different challenges that are better suited to their skill level. One major complaint Odyssey faces in this regard is that since Power Moons can be at the end of elaborate obstacle courses, or hiding in random patches of dirt, the former are rendered a waste of effort. And while I generally disagree with this line of thinking, I think Wonder achieves a better balance of Wonder Seed value by sorting every challenge by difficulty, and putting more of an emphasis on brevity rather than simplicity when it comes to break times, which tend to be the game's least difficult challenges. Badges, unlocked at badge challenges or shops, offer movement upgrades and quality of life features that subtly take some of the stress off of the player. Some of these are very situational, for example the Dolphin Kick badge that activates exclusively while underwater, but the great thing about badges is how simple it is to switch between them, encouraging the player to experiment with different effects. Though the first badge the game gives you is actually super OP, as it can be used to infinitely scale walls, you'll want to have this badge equipped 90% of the time, which kind of defeats the purpose of having multiple badges. Oops. Badges aren't exclusively designed to be helpful, however. There are 3 expert badges designed to make levels more difficult. You have Jet Run, which forces the player to run indefinitely but increases their Coyote time being the amount of frames after leaving the ground that the player is still allowed to jump. The Spring Jump badge, which causes the player to always hop after touching the ground but increases jump height significantly, and the Invisibility badge, which makes your character invisible both to you and to enemies in the stage. You may have noticed that all of these badges still give the player certain abilities that they otherwise wouldn't have had, so with some smart thinking you can actually use expert badges to give yourself an edge. And lastly, multiplayer. Yes, the act of playing the game with other people acts as a pseudo-easy mode. When New Super Mario Bros. Wii was released in 2009, it introduced 4-player simultaneous multiplayer to the series, and with it came a change to the life system. When a player loses a life in multiplayer, instead of the level resetting to the last checkpoint, they reappear on the screen a few seconds later in a bubble. This bubble can be popped by other players who are still alive, allowing them to continue on with the level. This was the standard for every multiplayer Super Mario platformer to follow until Super Mario Bros. Wonder. In this game's multiplayer, if a player is defeated, they transform into a ghost, at which point they have 5 seconds to make contact with another player or a standee to be revived without losing a life. This new multiplayer life system in Wonder means that if players are urgent enough, it's theoretically possible to play through the game as poorly as possible and still never lose a single life. Not that lives were very valuable to begin with, but this change is still incredibly strange. What's the point of having lives in the first place if they can be completely bypassed with a basic feature like multiplayer? Well, I think this change has less to do with difficulty and more to do with the flow of gameplay. Super Mario Bros. Wonder makes several minor changes to the core gameplay loop of 2D Mario that seems catered towards removing as much chance from an average playthrough as possible. For example, with the removal of triple jumps, the height of a jump is solely based on how long you press the jump button for. This change may seem to the detriment of skilled players, but it does prevent the possibility of jumping too late and unintentionally losing height and momentum, guaranteeing more precision. The game also makes smart use of NPCs to preserve the flow of gameplay. Levels are polluted with the aptly named Talking Flowers, voiced by the Legends of Awesomeness guy of all people, which allow the player to receive hints and flavor text without diverting their attention to the on-screen text. There are also Poplins, the Flower Kingdom's equivalent to toads, which use traditional text boxes to grab the player's attention during important cutscenes or events. There are dozens of other minor changes I could cover, such as the fact that losing a life no longer boots you out of the level, but what I really want to focus on here is how Wonder handles local co-op. In the new Super Mario Bros. Games, other players could bounce off of you, collide in mid-air to cancel out your momentum, or even screw you over intentionally by throwing you into pits. In order to create tighter level layouts in Wonder while eliminating the possibility of failure by factors out of a player's control, it simply isn't possible to have these types of interactions anymore. Player characters will now always phase through one another in a fashion similar to ghosts. Wait, so those online ghost players that cause such a big stink on social media are functionally the same as the characters controlled by the people sitting right next to you? Well, not quite. Local co-op players still exist in the same game instance. They all affect the same objects in the same world, and they're all tied to the same camera, meaning your friends can't rush ahead of a struggling player to, say, place a standee that would let them skip a difficult section. However, online multiplayer introduces misalignments. Online players can be well ahead of you both in regular gameplay and during scripted events. And because standees persist for a long time, levels will be polluted with easy revive spots. Wonder's online multiplayer is essentially a permanent cheat code to never lose a life, and never touch difficult platforming sections. So, what's stopping a player from keeping the online mode permanently enabled and never struggling to clear a level again? The same thing that stops players from only playing levels with a single star difficulty, or from playing through the entire game as Yoshi or Nabbit. A little bit of smart thinking on the developer's part to encourage self-restraint. Let me explain. The possibility of unlocking new stages or secret paths encourages players to seek out the more challenging levels. The inability to use power-ups encourages players to only use Yoshi or Nabbit when absolutely necessary. And what encourages players to not abuse the handicaps provided in online play? Nothing. The player will earn heart points the more they assist other online players, a metric which offers no reward nor has any ties to progression. But our stupid monkey brains like big numbers, because they trigger our dopamine receptors. So what do? We try to max out the number. A player who sticks around other players, sticks standees close to particularly challenging sections, chases after ghosts to revive them, gives up power-ups, and reaches the goal pole with other players will be rewarded far more heart points than players who simply rush through the game and abuse standees to cheese any challenge. When interacting with other online players, you'll see their username, their heart points, and any medals they've collected through normal game progression, the latter two serving as a good indicator of how skilled the player is and how willing they are to help you out in a dicey situation. Heart points are an incredibly smart way to make skilled players feel accomplished in sticking close to other players and lending them a hand, and to help less skilled players find new friends who'd be willing to help them experience and enjoy the game to its fullest. But what truly makes the online multiplayer so special is the language that the fandom has developed to assist struggling players, even when it doesn't grant them heart points. Super Mario Bros. Wonder has incredibly limited options for communication. If you press the X button, you'll see that there are just 4 options for greetings. But just because the greetings are the only mechanic intended for communication, doesn't mean that they're the only mechanic that can be used for communication. Remember how I said before that standees persist for a long time? Well, that makes them really useful as signs to grab other players' attention, as unlike greetings, they last for longer than a few seconds, and can be placed anywhere that a player can stand. This includes in the foreground, on top of invisible blocks, and where floating platforms could appear, all of which can be used to convey information to the player. On several occasions, standees helped me remember the locations of secret exits, seeds, and tokens that I had forgotten about in the year that I waited to replay this game. And as if that isn't enough to convince you of the power of standees, then look no further than the search party levels. Search parties often involve hidden blocks that are only made visible by playing as a specific character. In solo play, this would mean replaying the same level at least 12 times just to uncover the locations of vital blocks. During online play, however, you have the aid of not only the other players within the level, but dozens of standees placed by people who were previously in that stage. What was once a nuisance became a collaborative effort of players both past and present to uncover crucial items and mark their location for future players. No reward or points expected in return. Super Mario Bros. Wonder creates a safe environment for Mario fans across the globe to have organic interactions with one another. And it's incredibly simple to connect to the internet and stay connected, even when reopening the game or pausing mid-level, all without additional wait times. Unfortunately, there is the matter of paying for a Nintendo Switch Online subscription, but considering prices are as little as $4.38 a year under a family membership, I think that should count for something. Super Mario Bros. Wonder is the closest Nintendo has gotten during the Switch era to honoring its original online motto, and as a result, this traditional 2D side-scrolling platformer, with less online interactivity than the two platformers to come before it, has become one of my favorite online games of all time. Once upon a time, online gaming came naturally to me. I'd dedicate entire weekends to scouring the pages of Super Mario Maker, or hitting the racetracks in Mario Kart 8, or absolutely sucking balls at the Minecraft Elytra minigame. When I entered high school, I began to develop severe depression and anxiety, and it became increasingly difficult to stay present in conversations or participate in my hobbies. Every time I'd connect online, I'd have this overwhelming feeling that no one truly cared if I was present. The only reason cooperative players would work with me is because they'd be punished for not doing so, and the only reason competitive players would bother to play against me is because an online matchmaking system told them that they have to. I found solace in single-player experiences, knowing that I had full control over my experience and couldn't be bogged down by bad actors or a poor internet connection. And when I first pre-ordered Super Mario Bros. Wonder, I expected exactly that. A really solid single-player experience to add to the dozens of other games that served that exact purpose. But out of pure curiosity, I decided to make my way to Professor Connect and enable online play. I decided to allow other players to shape my experience with the game, to enjoy the new game hype with them in real time. I decided to listen to the strangers on social media who said that their chance encounters created new friends and strong bonds. And what I found was truly wonderful.